The air is heavy, thick with the bitter tang of olive oil lamps burning low. Their flames flicker and shiver, throwing long shadows across stone walls carved by centuries of prayer. At first, you hear it faintly, a low rumble like distant thunder rolling in from the desert. Then it grows, hooves pounding the earth, the sharp crack of siege engines tearing wood apart, and then the screams. Not the wild chaos of battle, but something deeper. A breaking, a chorus of voices collapsing into the night. Women calling names into the dark as flames claw upward beyond the Mount of Olives. Dust fills your mouth, scratching your throat, mingling with the metallic taste of blood already spilled. Figures in scale armor surge through a breach in the wall, faces smeared with sweat and fury, swords flashing under torchlight. Doors shatter one after another. 400 voices rise in defiance, then fall silent. And this is only the beginning. What follows will echo through empires, a shadow no king, no god could outrun. Hold on. We're stepping straight into the heart of it. Before we go further, you need to know this. What you're about to hear involves systematic violence against women of faith, captured and destroyed in the name of conquest. These events come from ancient chronicles, etched into stone and bone. They are real, and they cut deep. If the weight feels too heavy, it's okay to step away. I'll understand. But for those who stay, we honor the loss not by lingering on suffering, but by tracing the machinery that made it possible, the empire that crushed them without hesitation. Imagine a world balanced between rival suns, the golden eagle of Byzantium clawing desperately at the fading stars of old Rome. To the east, the fire altars of Persia blaze brighter with every victory, fed by Zoroastrian flames that promise order through domination. This wasn't chaos. This was a machine, oiled with ambition, driven by betrayal, and turning steadily toward Jerusalem in the spring of 614. At the center of it stood Khosrow II, Shahanshah of the Sasanian realm. He ruled from Ctesiphon, a city of soaring marble arches and hanging gardens where the Tigris whispered secrets of power beneath moonlit bridges. Khosrow was no mythic monster. He was a man shaped by survival. His father, Hormizd IV, had ruled with a brutal hand, crushing nobles until revolt became inevitable. When the rebellion came, Khosrow, barely 20, fled west, seeking refuge with the Byzantine Emperor Maurice. He begged for help. Maurice answered, sending legions that shattered the rebel general Bahram Choban and restored the young prince to his throne. Gratitude bound them like iron chains, until 602. That year, a low-ranking centurion named Phocas murdered Maurice, displaying his corpse for the ravens. The betrayal detonated something inside Khosrow. He swore vengeance, not just for power, but for the father figure who had saved his life. This wasn't blind rage. The chronicles suggest something colder, accounting. And with that, Khosrow unleashed his armies. They poured across Armenia, Mesopotamia, and Syria like hunting hounds off the leash. Cities fell in sequence. Damascus in 611, Antioch soon after. By 613, his general Sharbaraz, hawk-faced, ruthless, his name meaning boar of the realm, had carved a blood-soaked path straight into the Levant. And there, at the center of faith and stone, stood Jerusalem. To the Christians within its walls, Jerusalem was the navel of the world, the birthplace of their God, a city guarded by walls as thick as Scripture itself. To Khosrow, it was a ledger entry. Break it, and Byzantium would bleed. But the board was more complex than walls and armies. Jewish communities, long barred from the city since 70 CE by Byzantine decree, saw an opening. Persian rule promised access, maybe even restoration. Whispers spread through Babylonian exile networks. Aid the Shah. Rebuild the temple. When Shahryar's advanced, as many as 20,000 Jewish rebels slipped into the ranks, daggers hidden beneath prayer shawls. The siege began on April 15, 614. Catapults hurled stones as large as wagons against the walls. For 21 days, defenders held firm, arrows screaming through the air like angry spirits. Then a tower collapsed. Dust poured down the stone like tears. The machine engaged. Picture Jerusalem's streets as they once were. Narrow veins pulsing with pilgrims and merchants. Incense drifting from the church of the Holy Sepulchre. Patriarch Zechariah stood among them, his white beard framing eyes heavy with the burden of a scattered flock. Born in Gaza to a family of shepherds turned scribes, Zechariah had risen through the church with words sharper than steel, mending schisms and steadying kings. He was no warrior, but his voice had carried nations. At dawn, he climbed the ramparts one last time, tracing the sign of the cross over the city, praying the walls would hold like faith itself. Below him, Sharbaraz directed the assault from a black stallion draped in silk. His soldiers wore lamellar armor that flashed like dragonhide in the sun. Jewish allies surged beside them, cheers colliding with the clash of bronze. The defenders fought street by street, but numbers broke them. Smoke rose from the suburbs. Inside the Church of the Resurrection, Zechariah ordered the true cross, the relic believed to have borne Christ, hidden beneath the altar in a silver reliquary. It wasn't enough. Turncoats guided Persian scouts straight to the crypt. At noon, Sharbaraz rode forward under a banner of parley. His face was scarred by 20 campaigns, his voice rough through an interpreter. "Yield the city and the relic," he demanded. "Khosrow offers mercy." Zechariah looked past him, to monks clutching beads like lifelines, to women herding children toward the pool of Mamilla, its waters a false sanctuary. "The cross stays," he said calmly. "It is not yours to claim." Sharbaraz laughed, a short, bitter sound, and gave the signal. By dusk, the inner walls collapsed. Persians and their allies flooded the holy sites, torches hissing against sacred oils. Zechariah barricaded himself inside the sepulchre, but hands tore him out, chaining his wrists with irons meant for galley slaves. The true cross was dragged through blood-slick streets, its silver casing dented by careless hands. Shahryar claimed it as a trophy. Then came Khosrow's command. Couriers arrived breathless, their horses lathered with sweat. The orders were clear: not just victory, erasure, leave no root. The machine turned again. Night fell, but the screams cut through it. At the pool of Mamilla, thousands huddled, priests, merchants, families whose only crime was prayer. Soldiers waded in, swords rising and falling. The water ran red. A deacon named Thomas whispered numbers as he watched, later scratching them into a ledger. 4,500 at the pool alone, or 24,000, depending on whose grief you believe. Some say 60,000 died in total, others half that. Historians argue, bones do not. In 1989, excavators uncovered a cave near the site. Skulls and femurs piled together, dated by coins fused into the crush. This was not chaos. It was systemized. Captains rewarded for quotas, reports tallied in Ctesiphon like grain counts. Zechariah, beaten and bound, was brought before Sharbaraz. The general offered wine laced with mockery. "Your God fled," he said. Zechariah spat blood. He weeps with us. Orders were orders. Zechariah was shackled into a column of 35,000 captives and marched east. But the deepest fracture had not yet come. Lift your gaze now to the Mount of Olives, where stone paths wound through whispering groves. There, in a limestone convent, 400 nuns lived lives measured in bells and bread, silence and song, and the machine was already climbing the hill. They were known as the Brides of Heaven, 400 women wrapped in black veils, their days shaped by prayer, labor, and the slow rhythm of bells echoing through stone corridors. The convent clung to the Mount of Olives like a final breath, carved from pale limestone that caught the moonlight. No full names survive. The chronicles blur them into a single litany of devotion. But one figure steps forward through the dust of history. Sister Maria. She had been a widow from Bethlehem, her husband taken by fever years before. Grief had led her here, into silence and service. Her hands, once rough from tending herb gardens for the poor, now folded in prayer before dawn. At 35, she led the Vespers, her voice steady enough to carry the sisters through years of Byzantine taxes, raids, and uncertainty. She was calm when the glow of Jerusalem turned from gold to ember that night. Calm when the distant rumble reached the hill. First came the sound, hooves scraping stone, men shouting in unfamiliar accents. Then the sight. Persian riders circling the convent like wolves testing a fence, horses flecked with foam from the charge. Sharbaraz's lieutenants, drunk on victory and wine, rode forward and demanded entry. "Surrender," one bellowed, his voice thick with Mesopotamian dust. "Live as servants." Maria climbed the low wall, her veil snapping in the night wind. "We serve one master," she called back. Her words carried like incense over the courtyard. Behind her, the sisters gathered, clutching psalters as if they were shields. Their voices rose together. Kyrie Ellison. The officer laughed and raised his hand. Arrows struck the wooden gate, one slicing Maria's arm, burning hot as it drew blood. Dawn crept in gray and cold. Rams wrapped in wet hides slammed against the gate until it splintered. Soldiers poured inside, faces twisted by anticipation, armor clattering like loose bones. The nuns were herded into the courtyard, divided with methodical gestures. 50 to one captain, 30 to another. Numbers spoken like livestock counts. Maria fought until a blow dropped her to the stones. Veils were torn away, the air filled with sobs and the dull scrape of boots. What followed was not frenzy. It was deliberate. Bodies pressed against cold walls. Cries smothered by hands trained in conquest. Some sisters whispered prayers through it. Faces set with the stillness of painted icons, their faith turning inward like a blade. Others broke, voices splintering into silence. Maria, dragged beneath a colonnade, locked eyes with a young novice. Anna, barely 18, an orphan from the Jordan Valley, whose laughter had once filled the refectory. "Sing," Maria whispered, blood at her lip. And they did. A thin hymn rose into the morning air, fragile but unbroken, clashing against grunts and gasps. When the soldiers tired, steel finished what flesh could not endure. 400 blades fell, or so the ledgers claim. Bodies were piled in the refectory, blood seeping into flagstones worn smooth by generations of kneeling prayers. When word reached Sharbaraz later, he nodded. Khosrow's tally swelled, yet even here the system cracked, just barely. One conscript, pulled from the eastern marches, lowered his sword at the last moment. He muttered something about a Christian mother left behind and vanished into the dawn, another ghost slipping free of the machine. Breathe here. In the garden, an almond tree still bloomed. Pale petals drifted onto blood-dark stone. A single bee hovered, drawn to nectar untouched by steel. Life insisted even then. The conquest did not end at Jerusalem's gates. From Sharbaraz's tent, couriers galloped east with scrolls sealed in fire motifs, spoils listed, numbers counted, the true cross loaded onto a silk-draped cart, Zechariah chained beside it, 35,000 captives roped together like harvested grain. In Ctesiphon, Khosrow read the reports by lamplight. His queen, Shirin, stood beside him. A Christian from Armenia, her faith a quiet counterweight. She read the subtext he ignored. "Send the patriarch to me," Khosrow ordered. "Not for trial, for display." Zechariah arrived months later, paraded through bazaars where merchants haggled over Byzantine silks stripped from the dead. Across the provinces, the pattern repeated. Villages emptied, churches burned, not always by decree, but by captains chasing promotion through cleansed lands. Jewish allies who dreamed of temple stones watched Persian overseers tally taxes instead. Incentives replaced promises. The numbers dissolved into whispers. A baker in Nablus whose oven went cold forever. A fisherman from Galilee whose nets tangled in exile. In a hillside chapel near Bethany, a priest named Elias hid with 12 parishioners. When soldiers burst in demanding icons, Elias offered a plain wooden cross. This is enough. Something in his calm mirrored their own fire priests. They left him bound, but alive, a rare hitch in the grind. From Zechariah's place in captivity, chained within a caravan winding through the ruins of Edessa, the empire revealed itself. Not a beast, but a web. Overseers reported to satraps, satraps to generals, generals to Khosrow. Gold flowed for zeal. Demotion followed mercy. Shirin worked quietly in the shadows, ransoming hundreds where she could, her influence limited, but real. Still, the toll climbed. Even the lowest counts whispered 60,000 gone, a hollow carved into the land. Ironically, Persian engineers paused mid-campaign to repair Byzantine aqueducts, admiring their design. Water flowed again to fields they had scorched. Beauty slipped through the machine's blind spots. 20 days after the walls fell, Sharbaraz summoned his officers inside the desecrated church of the Holy Sepulchre. Its dome was cracked, light spilling through like a wound. The true cross lay on a velvet bier, guarded by spearmen whose eyes flicked nervously toward shadows. Zechariah was dragged forward, chains clinking like funeral bells. "You hold wood," the patriarch said calmly. "We hold its weight." Sharbaraz leaned closer, his boar tusk amulet catching the light. Khosrow's orders burned in his thoughts. "Erase the faith that fuels Byzantine legions. Kneel to the Shah and live." Zechariah laughed, a sound that echoed through broken marble and drew gasps from captives outside. "I kneel to the one who rose from this stone." Outside, what remained of the convent survivors were herded toward the pool of Mamilla. Word had spread. The nuns, symbols of purity, were the final tally. Soldiers hesitated near Maria's body, her hands still clutching Anna's torn veil. One murmured about dreams where fire turned to water. The line wavered, then the crack widened. A Jewish elder, Nehemiah ben Hushil, installed as governor by the Persians, approached Sharbaraz. His own dreams of temple restoration were already crumbling into ash. "Spare the cross," he urged softly. "Bind them with it." He sensed revolt simmering, whispers thickening in the alleys. But the machine overrode warning. At Mamilla, swords rose again. Mothers shielded daughters. Priests chanted into the din. 4,000 fell there, bodies sinking into the pool like stones into judgment. From a nearby rise, Zechariah prayed through tears. "Forgive them," he whispered, "for they tally souls like spice." The breaking came not in blood, but in backlash. A deserter reached Byzantine scouts with stories too heavy to contain. Resistance thickened, supplies thinned, reports sent to Khosrow grew strained. The relic meant to crown his victory became a curse, its weight slowing caravans, its presence stirring unrest. In Ctesiphon, Khosrow paced his gardens as Shirin pleaded. "It poisons the victory." He waved her off, but doubt crept in like dawn. The machine, so efficient in conquest, was beginning to choke on its own spoils. Khosrow's end came swiftly, as clean and cold as a drawn blade. In 628, the weight of endless war finally cracked the Sasanian court. Nobles, drained by years of conquest and famine, turned to his son, Kavad II, once imprisoned on suspicion of treason, now freed by men desperate for change. They stormed the palace before dawn. Khosrow was found in his bathhouse, cornered, stripped of the grandeur that had once made the earth tremble. He begged for mercy. None came. A silk cord tightened around his throat, drawn by hands that had saluted him for decades. The Shah, who had tallied cities like numbers, died quietly, erased by the same system he had perfected. When the news reached Sharbaraz in Jerusalem, he burned his ledgers. Pages curled into ash, quotas vanishing in smoke. The true cross was returned as part of the peace. Zechariah, ransomed through Shirin's last efforts before her own suicide, walked home toward a city of ghosts. Nehemiah ben Hushal's body was later found in a shallow grave, marked by Christian blades, revenge from a revolt he could not contain. The machine did not just slow, it rusted. Persia fractured soon after, weakened and hollowed out. Within a decade, Arab armies would slice through its remains with startling ease. Survivors scattered like seeds across scorched ground. Jerusalem, once alive with chant and incense, fell silent under Persian administrators who taxed but did not rebuild. On the Mount of Olives, the convent stood empty. Its garden grew wild. Bees hummed through broken stone to no one. Zechariah did what he could. He patched the dome of the Holy Sepulchre with salvaged blocks, restoring prayer where silence had settled. But the wound beneath the stone never healed. Byzantine Emperor Heraclius reclaimed Jerusalem in 629, marching barefoot with the returned relics in an act of public penance. Less than a decade later, in 638, the city would fall again, this time to Islam. The cross returned. The loss lingered. The long shadow stretched far beyond the city. Christian heartlands were thinned. Monasteries shuttered. A diaspora spread west, carrying stories soaked in ash and blood. And in one of history's sharpest ironies, the true cross, once paraded as a symbol of humiliation, became Byzantium's rallying cry. Splinters of it, revered as relics, would later ignite crusades centuries down the line. What was meant to mock faith ended up fueling it. Now fast forward to 1989. On the outskirts of Jerusalem, dust stirred beneath careful hands. Ronnie Reich, a wiry archaeologist with an eye for hidden layers, knelt inside a cave near Jaffa Gate. His team had followed rumors of a Byzantine tomb. What they found instead made the air feel colder. Bones, hundreds of them, tangled like roots in dry soil. Femurs snapped, skulls caved in. Nearby coins, stamped with the profile of Emperor Heraclius, pinned the date precisely. Spring, 614. The cave, later known as the Mamilla Cave after Strategius's chronicle, swallowed light. Reich traced a finger along a child's rib, his breath catching. This was no raid, he murmured into his notebook. This was erasure. Yet the findings carried a deeper chill. 7 mass graves confirmed slaughter on a massive scale, but not the total annihilation described in every text. Churches were not uniformly burned. Columns still stood. Aqueducts continued to flow. Homes were reoccupied. The city endured. Violence had been real, but selective, precise. The machine had chosen its targets carefully. Published in 2010, Reich's work with Gideon Avni reshaped the narrative. Not 60,000 faceless dead, but lives interrupted. A woman's bracelet twisted as she fled, a signet ring stamped with a fish lost in the dirt. History shrank from abstraction back into human scale. Today, that cave is sealed beneath modern streets. Above it, tourists sip coffee, unaware of the bones resting below their feet. But they whisper all the same. Power breaks bodies. Memory redraws the map. Return, one last time, to the courtyard on the Mount of Olives. The stone is cold now, worn smooth by centuries of wind. Almond petals still fall in spring. The voices of the nuns, silenced that morning, drift faintly through olive leaves when the light is just right. They were meant to disappear, counted as numbers in a Shah's scroll. They did not. Their story clings to the soil Khosrow's boots once crushed. It survives in the dust brushed away by archaeologists like Reich, and in the words preserved by chroniclers like Strategius. And now, it survives here, with you. Because you chose to listen through the noise, through the fear, through the weight of it all. If this shadow lingers, leave a comment below. What machine in our world echoes this one? Your voice keeps their light burning. Thank you for staying.